Welcome, everyone. My name is Charles Vilmorin, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Validation, the First World Congress. And before we get started, I will need to go through a few housekeeping reminders. We, as participants of today's webinar, can earn up to 3 NAB, NCAP, NCTRC, and/or NCC-DPCU credits today. To earn the credits, you simply need to attend a full session, as few as 1 session, or as many of the whole 3. Please fill in the information sent to you by email or in the chat by midnight Eastern on Friday, February 18th, so we can process your certificate of attendance and issue up to 3 hours for these CEUs. Please note that due to the incredible number of attendees today, we will only be able to send emails next week, throughout the week of the 22nd, but no later than the 28th. Each certificate is emailed individually, and please contact after the 28th should you have any questions. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, and I know that at this point in time we are all very familiar with Zoom, but I'd like to remind everyone that Zoom has 2 features, the chat, and I see a lot of people in the chat welcoming and greeting each other, so welcome everyone. But if you want a question to be sent to the panelists or the speakers today, please use the Q&A feature. And last but not least, if you want your chat to be directed for the whole audience, you'll see in the drop-down in the Zoom, please unselect panelists, make sure you select panelists and attendees. And with that, I'd love to introduce you to Vicki de Klerk-Rubin, the Executive Director of VTI. Welcome, Vicki.
Thank you so much, Charles, or Megan, or both. And I am very grateful for this opportunity and for you guys to work with you. We start at the very beginning, which is always a very good place to start. And that, no, go back to the film, please. Yes. We're going to start with my mom, Naomi Feil, who created the validation method back in the 1970s, 60s, 70s. And without further ado, here is a conversation that with Naomi Feil. Roll it. Good morning.
I'm going to say guten Morgen. Good morning.
Good morning.
Kein Französisch, kein Deutsch, nur Englisch. Oui, je comprends. Alors, commençons. I want to welcome each one of you to the first validation conference, world conference ever. And I'm so happy to see you here and know that you have taken the time and given of your energy. That gives me so much pleasure and makes my life here on earth worthwhile.
After you left New York with 2 little girls and you went back to the Montefiore home, tell me a little bit about what you saw.
Well, the people in the special services, and I knew some of them from before, most of them were restrained, but the people were in we call them geriatric chairs, with a tray very often in front, so they couldn't move. There was a lot of yelling, oh, help, help, nurse, help. And so Haldol and Thorazine had just emerged. It was a new drug. So that was given when the people yelled. They got some Haldol and Thorazine to keep them quiet. And that was the goal, was that they would be quiet. Most of them, if they did anything, they used reality orientation and also negative reinforcement. I don't think they were aware that's what they were doing. But if you yell like that, you're not going to get any dinner. Well, because what was happening was horrible. The people, a lot of them they were my friends. I knew as a little girl, Mrs. Liu. But when I came back, I hardly recognized her because she was restrained and her eyes were kind of not glazed. They weren't focused. There was no life in her.
What were your first steps, do you think?
Well, the first step, I was look at Mrs. Liu and saw that she wasn't responding. And so I went closer to her because I felt she would remember me. And I very gently touched her on the cheek. And I used the mother touch, or mother touched the children, and Mrs. Liu's eyes opened. And there was the cognition. She recognized me. And they were just blank before. I was able to explore with them.
Right.
What happened? Mrs. Liu, you look so sad. And I verbalized how she felt. What's the worst thing that happened to you? And validation techniques developed. Like, what's the worst thing is polarity and what happened, asking open questions. But much later, right. And now I just wanted Mrs. Liu to have some life back in her. Where when one of the people in my group, Mr. Rose, would call the administrator a goddamn son of a bitch, instead of, oh, Mr. Rose, don't say that. And look at all the other people, they're getting all upset. Instead of that, I would say, right on, Mr. Rose, what did that son of a bitch do to you? Because he was talking about my father, and I was rebelling at the time against my father. So I really identified with Mr. Rose.
Right.
And that's really how the techniques came about. When I said to him, what did that goddamn son of a bitch do to you? And he would say to me, and then after a while, he wouldn't yell as much. He wouldn't swear as much. So I realized that when people express their anger and release it, it dissipates. People don't have to yell as much and swear as much anymore if they're listened to.
How did your colleagues react to all this?
Well, the administrator said in a big staff meeting about me, he said, she's as crazy as the people she works with. And that just about sums it up. Well, they had no respect for me. I mean, it's hard to get people who have acute memory loss together and focus on each other and talk where they can't talk to each other. So that would take a lot of work. And I was able to do it. I was able to give people roles. So I had a welcomer and I had a hostess who passed the cookie. And right in the middle of the welcoming, in would come one of the nurses and take the welcomer out. So we had no more welcomer. They didn't say anything, excuse me, or anything, just came in.
You were trying to really reach out to these people, and people around you, your supposed colleagues, were making fun of you and sabotaging your work.
That's true. That's very true.
And didn't that make you afraid, or?
Well, it made me think they are so stupid. They don't understand the people. They shouldn't be working here. That was what I felt, but I had to keep those feelings to myself. So I just ignored them. I think I tried to express them to a psychologist. When the psychologist saw my group, and afterwards he said to me, you're validating these people. And I said, hey, that's a great name. And I had called it group work with disoriented old people in a nursing home. And that was a little too much. So when he said, you're validating the people, I thought, hey, that's fine. That's what we'll call it. People were using validation, and not only the ideas, but the name. They still use the ideas without the name. But that's okay. But they were using the name also for other things that they were doing, like with diversion, that was very popular.
And lying.
Lying, they called it a therapeutic lie.
Right.
I don't think any lie would ever be therapeutic. How the people got away with that, I am amazed. Because they had anyone with social work training or psychology training would not lie.
But a lot of people misunderstand validation and think that you have to pretend or lie.
When you empathize with another human being and explore, you're not lying. I think that's terrible. But
how do you handle all the criticisms and misunderstandings?
Get angry, like I'm angry now. I wrote in some articles, in some social work journals. I was very fortunate that my husband, Ed, was a filmmaker because he filmed my group. And someone had come from the Office on Aging and they saw the group. And the director of the office, said, hey, this is a good method, because she saw the results. And at first, they thought it wasn't real people. They thought that Mrs. Gogolick and Mrs. Flew and Miss Freeman, that they were all actors.
You were asked then to do a workshop down in Columbus.
Right.
And you said no. That's
right. I said I couldn't do it. And he said, he said, you get right back on the telephone and tell them you do it. Yes, that was Ed. That's right.
Right. Then somebody from that workshop told somebody else, who told somebody else, who told somebody else, and soon you were booking up a full calendar.
And you were living in Vienna, I think, at the time. And you asked me to come, and they wanted to do training workshops.
March 1989. That was the first one in Europe. I think between 1990 and 1995, there was, in Europe, explosive growth.
Right.
Can you talk about how you changed it at all?
Well, after the workshops, everybody got evaluation. And I looked at those evaluations, and a lot of them said, it's not clear, it's too much information, we can't process it. So I learned that I have to simplify, and that's when I started to role play. Instead of being very academic, I role played, something I can do well. And from the role play, the people learn much more than when I talked. Well, the most important is to have empathy and not think of the old person who has a memory loss as having a disease. The disease model, I think, is not only cruel, but inaccurate and unethical. Now, when they're young, that's different. But at my age, at age 90, which I am, if I suddenly don't know where I am, that would not be a disease. That would be a function of aging, where I'm losing a lot of brain cells and my cognition isn't so great. There's always, I think the important thing is that there's always a meaning behind behavior, no matter how crazy it seems from their point of view.
But let's go back to your 50-year career from 1961, when you first started back at the Montefiore home, to publishing your book in 82, going out on the road and developing your workshops, and having done over 2,000 workshops over the whole world. What do you think was your biggest mistake?
My biggest mistake, I think, is trying to do too much at one time.
I'm going to ask the opposite. What was your proudest moment?
Proudest moment? I think when people like Rita Altman and Kevin Carlin, who were heads of big organizations, realized that what I was doing had worth. But when they recognized that this was really a most helpful way of working with people who have a dementia, and they supported me, that was very, then I felt much relieved, because before I felt really alone.
And now with your own last stage of life,
well,
would you put yourself in integrity versus despair or resolution?
On the whole, respect what I have done in my life with all the mistakes that I made, but the positives, I think, outshone the negatives, because people have learned. So I think that gives me the most satisfaction, that people have internalized the precepts and the ideology of validation, and therefore they use it, whether they recognize me or not. They have a method that they can use to help people that I developed, and that makes me feel very good about myself. That outweighs the negatives. Yeah, right.
Mm.
Well, I did what I could. I did as much as I could. I'll keep on doing if I am given the opportunity, but I'm satisfied with what I did. Well, I do want to thank you all for taking time, and I know your time is very a lot of demands made on you and your time, and you have taken the energy and the time to come here and learn more about validation. I want to especially to thank the next speaker, Hedwig Neu, who has been a loyal supporter of validation. And Hedwig, for me to have support from Hedwig and all of her colleagues has been a boon to me and has given me energy.
So, she's always a good starting place. But Hedwig Neu, our next speaker, carried on Naomi's dream in quite an incredible way. Hedwig, would you like me to start the PowerPoints now?
Yes, would be fine. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. I'll make it big, and I'll also ask you your first question, which is, can you tell us briefly about the place where you work?
Oh yes, it's named Diakonissen Speyer, and this is a large complex provider in Germany with facilities of the for the care of the sick. You can take the next folder, please. Disabled children and young people, the elderly, and with outpatient and inpatient hospices. In the area of care for the elderly, the Diakonissen Speyer operates 13 homes for the elderly with the option of short-term and long-term care, in addition to outpatient care services and daycare facilities. Since 2001, validation has been learned, taught, and implemented by staff, volunteers, and family carers in 8 homes for elderly people. 2 more homes began integrating validation into the daily facility routines in 2019. yeah, what is to say more? Diakonissen
Yeah.
Speyer,
It's a
additionally,
huge organization.
yes, it's a huge organization. Additionally, is a home for an authorized validation organization, which provides information and training in validation.
Right. And you're the head of that organization.
Yes, I'm the head.
So as the head of the Authorized Validation Organization, or we often say an AVO,
Yes,
what do
yes.
you do?
I have following responsibilities: develop and implement annual continuing education and training program in validation. The training program includes certified courses as well as non-certified seminars and courses, including a special course for middle and upper management, courses for volunteers, basic seminars for all employees, and one-day seminars such as validation of people with dementia with challenging behavior. Organization of support of 10 senior centers and 1 hospital in the implementation of validation concept for the everyday life of the facility. 8 of the mentioned senior centers and the geriatric department of a hospital of the Diakonissen Speyer have acquired a so-called VTI validation quality certificate, what a word, and are checked in a continuous process regarding their validation quality. Making validation known through press and public relations work, cooperation with other AVOs in Germany, assistance in establishing,
Yeah.
say, cooperation with VTI. And this I only can fulfill all these tasks because I have a really good team and my colleagues in the AVO and also validation teachers who work with us as freelancers.
For the people listening, you raced through that list of accomplishments, of things that you do every year and have been doing for, what, 20 years?
Well, yes, last year in November, we celebrated our 20th anniversary as an authorized validation organization. Yes, and this was really great. It was a special event because we have COVID and we only could meet with some representatives of each institution of the Diakonisses in Speyer, but we had a streaming of all presentations, and the interview with Naomi Feil was streamed in our communities, in these homes for older people and the hospital.
If we have time at the end of this interview, I want to go a little bit deeper into that quality certification because some people might be interested. But for now, I want, in these 20 years, you've had a lot of experiences. Can you tell us about one moment that sticks in your mind?
Yes, I remember the event when a resident of one of our facilities hit a nursing staff member. The staff member was injured. This was a dramatic event. The nursing team felt sorry for the colleague and found the resident's behavior so aggressive that consideration was given to having a doctor admit the resident to a gerontological psychiatric clinic where he would be placed on medication, and this would have been terrible. The validation practitioner who was thankfully brought in found that the resident had a great need for autonomy and self-determination, and that the caregiver had approached him too quickly. A case study discussion was held to work out the different levels of need. In the future, caregivers approached more slowly and observed well. There were never any more experience of violence.
Wow.
And this is one example I can remember. In our team of the Authorized Validation Organization, we tell us stories each day we see at our working place.
Right, right. Something so simple as how quickly you approach another human being can make a huge difference.
Yes, really.
Those simple, basic things. Yeah.
Yes, centering and observing are, I think, the urgent things in communication with elderly people.
And those are the first two steps in learning validation.
Really.
Yeah. How has integrating validation, which you did in these 8 homes, in care communities, how did it change the residents?
You could take the folder 5, please.
Sure. Oh, sorry. This one?
Yes, this one. Wait a minute. I lost my red line.
How has integrating validation into the care communities changed the residents?
Oh, as I remember, there are there overall fewer psychotropic drugs are needed after an acclimatization phase. The tendency to run away is 0. Restraints are almost no longer observed, and the inner withdrawal into non-verbal phases is almost non-existent. I remember that we had problems in our validation worker courses that the participants from our Diakonissen institutions, homes for older people, could not find clients in phase 3 and phase 4 because after 5 years, we reached the point in our homes for older people that the clients did not
withdraw
or in those phases. They lived in phase 1, phase 2 until they died.
Wow.
But now in this COVID time, we can see people who withdraw into non-verbal phases because they experience isolation in her rooms and so on, in their rooms and so on. This is a hard time for disoriented people.
Yeah. And how has it changed the staff, the personnel?
Now this is the folder 6.
This one?
Yes, this one. You can see how the stuff changed. There is more fun. There are no statistics for over the years. We can see that the staff have internalized the validation principle. Every behavior has a reason. Instead of short-term solutions, the behavior of the resident is reflected happen in case study discussions, and the need behind the behavior is considered. The multidisciplinary cooperation in the team has also improved, which means that the willingness to ask the certified validation practitioners to spontaneously apply validation when one registers that one is not getting anywhere oneself has grown significantly. So I believe they work better together and they speak more on the reason behind the behavior. This is, I think, the urgent point.
I've watched some of these case studies when I visited you last November, and the team discussions are on such a high level. They don't last that long, but when all the disciplines are sitting together and sharing from their perspective, nursing and activities and dietary and medical, and everybody is looking at one person. Yes. It's I think they enjoy it as well.
Yes, they have more fun by working with validation and exchange in those case study discussions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. In your experience, can anybody in a care facility use validation?
Now this is folder 7, the next one. And you can see these big shoes and in their small shoes, but it can be also other way, big shoes in small shoes. And the question is, can everyone stay in the emotional shoes of another person whole the time? And I think no. But at an organization like Diakonissen Speyer, employees are expected to treat clients as individuals without prejudice, regardless of their origin, gender, religion, skin color, disability, or illness. If you will, a validating attitude is expected from all employees. Staff members in our validation quality certified facilities are all required to attend a basic seminar, regardless of profession. In addition, anyone who wants to become a validation practitioner can do so. Validation is a method of communication and not a method of care. Therefore, our validation teams include validation practitioners from all areas: nursing, housekeeping, social work, pastoral care, physical and occupational therapy volunteers. But there are also people among our staff who do not want to use validation. They do not have to become validation workers. To become validation worker requires the willingness to engage deeply and with empathy with the emotions and needs of people with dementia who have reached their final stage of life. For this, the workers need a high degree of willingness for self-reflection. And this self-reflection is really urgent to do to have a good contact, a good relationship to the clients.
Yeah. Yeah. I am reminded of what Naomi always says. In the beginning, you have to be honest with yourself.
Yes.
You have to own your own feelings and prejudices, and then have the capacity to put those aside for the 5 minutes that you really enter into the world of another person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really wish that there are a lot of validation workers in social institutions, in homes for elderly care or in ambulant elderly care, because I experienced that as better the staff is trained, as better is the quality of life of people with dementia.
Couldn't agree with you. I think everybody on this webinar Congress would agree with that. Yeah. You even have a special training for non-care staff, managers, housekeepers, technical people. Do you have a story about that?
Oh, yes. Old woman with cognitive decline had been a secretary by profession. In the senior center where she lived, she drove her wheelchair through the corridors all day long, asking in a plaintive tone, "Isn't there anything to do?" This went on for hours. No offer brought her relief, not even the biography-oriented offers. She was even given a typewriter in her room, but she ignored it. One day, the door of the director's office was open and the lady went to the office complaining. The facility manager asked her about her past work and what she missed most. After that, the lady sat in the facility manager's office for an hour every day. She felt acknowledged. Sometimes she sorted papers. Sometimes she just observed and gave advice. I remember this manager told me the story that he was very angry with his computer. And she said to him, I believe I need your translation. She said to him, mache es nicht kaputt.
Don't break it.
Yes. And this was really funny to all of us, hearing
Sure.
that she was advising him not to make the computer, not to break the computer.
Yeah. But what's amazing about that story is that the administrator of the facility knew enough to take a breath.
Yes.
And let her sit and talk for, it couldn't have been more than 3 minutes.
Yes.
And just to sit in his office while he continued doing stuff and acknowledged her.
And in this hour, the staff from the unit was entlasted.
Yeah,
Relieved.
they were relieved.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they knew what to do. The lady was relieved. The staff was relieved. Yes. And the manager had a personal assistant for 1 hour, an advisor.
Really. And he also enjoyed this time and had fun. It was also good for him. You are right.
That's also important and good to hear.
Yes. And I have another story.
Yeah.
As a housekeeper, one old lady thought the living area was an inn. She had been an innkeeper in the past. Therefore, at inappropriate time, she would clear the tables that had just been set and try to scare always the other residents. Thinking that it was already late in the evening and that a curfew had begun. This behavior only diminished after the housekeeper asked her to help with her work. The housekeeper used validation to identify the client's needs. And then she helped, she was in a structure which helped also the staff and the client. They work together.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome. What is the most important thing for staff to learn, do you think?
So I think we can take the folder 9.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. This is the first of all. We say you in Germany you should take on other classes. First of all, a paradigm shift away from the one-sided pathologizing image of humankind to the validation image of humankind must take place. So the change of attitude is the most important thing. In the application of validation centering, observing and empathetically adapting to the other person are just as important as self-care. You need both.
Yeah. And what's the most difficult thing for people to learn?
This is also the most difficult thing for them to learn, to change the attitude. In addition, it is often difficult to maintain or re-establish centeredness in view of the fact that care staff have to take care of more than one person. It is also not always easy to distinguish between empathy and other attitudes, such as sympathy or pity, and to put one's own needs aside. The application of validation techniques requires practice and are not that difficult from a purely technical point of view. It's really more hard to reflect if I have empathy with another person or sympathy.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples of how validation is used by activity staff, what we sometimes call engagement officers, or they have many different names, but the people who provide activities throughout a day?
Yes, in Germany we call them Alltagsbegleiter.
Daily life.
Daily life accompanies, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the validation team, which as I mentioned, also includes employees from nursing, pastoral care, housekeeping, etc. There is frequent discussion about which residents should be regularly accompanied with validation. The residents are assigned to the different validation practitioners, preferably to the activity staff, to the daily life accompanies. Validation practitioners from nursing are more likely to apply validation situationally integrated in the care process. In addition, validation groups are firmly anchored in the activity schedule, if possible, on a daily basis. Situational on spontaneous. How do you speak this word?
It's situational or spontaneous.
Application of validation takes place when activity workers notice in their other individual and group activities that a resident needs special attention, and when the nursing staff who have only attended a basic seminar are not getting anywhere with the knowledge and skills they have acquired there. Then the activity staff, who are usually also validation workers, are called in to use validation. They are like that's the English word of Feuerwehr. They are a validation
firefighters.
Firefighters, yes. And our I think they are also crisis managers. If there is a crisis or a conflict with a disoriented old client, they are called to help.
And group validation is done primarily by your activity leaders.
Yes, this is an urgent point. You could open the folder 10 on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and this
I know
is,
that in all of the homes that have been certified, there's at least one and usually two validation groups each week.
Yes, 2 or 3 groups each week.
Yeah.
And also under COVID circumstances. And I actually did a course for an online course for managers of the Union Hilfswerk Berlin. And I presented a video of one of our validation groups in one of our homes. And they said, we do need this group validation in our homes.
Yeah.
This was the point where I realized that they now see the effect of validation.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was all our questions, and I see we've got just a couple of minutes more. I wanted to go back to the quality certification because that was a huge process for you personally, for the staff, your staff, but also for every person who works at one of the care facilities.
Yes, really.
Can you talk about how you accomplished that? Well, what does it take to get that certification?
Oh, it was a really long way of small steps. At the very beginning, in 2001, we developed a concept for integrating validation in everyday life of all senior centers, which belong to the organization. That have been at the beginning 9 facilities. This concept integrated all the points that are checked in the VTI validation quality certification. I think you could take the next folder 11.
There you go.
Initially, however, there was no talk of implementing the VTI quality certification. Then in 2009, the first facility, this was a senior center, Pfarrer Johann Schiller House, decided that they wanted to be certified. First, we did a so-called internal audits. This was a self-evaluation, if you want, and training measures were intensified. In the addition, the direct care staff was trained on the job, which means that the validation teachers accompanied the care staff with the clients and demonstrated the application of validation or observed how they made contact with disoriented people. They received feedback. This type of professional support, also called supervision, was given to both validation practitioners and staff who had only attended the basic seminar. Validation teams were established in the facility. A so-called validation officer was appointed who maintained contact with the AVO. A course for families was held and family consultation hour was introduced. The volunteers also took part in the basic seminar. A validation teacher was in the facility on specific days to advise the facility and nursing service management team on the implementation of validation concept. After another internal audit, an appointment was made with Vicki de Klerk for an external audit. This led to the certification of the first facility. In 2013, the next facility was certified. After that, the board decided that all senior centers should strive for VTI quality certification. Since then, 2 or 3 senior centers are audited on a regular basis each year, and if successful, certified or recertified. The VTI validation quality certificate is valid for 5 years, which is why all our facilities are in a continuous quality process regarding validation and are continuously supervised by AVO teachers. There is one more special development in 2017. The geriatrics department of one of the 2 Diakonissen Speyer hospitals was certified for the first time. This is acute care hospital. We started the process by having a working group adapt the quality criteria for senior centers to the conditions of an acute hospital. These adapted criteria were approved by VTI for use. The certification audit was carried out according to these criteria. Whether it's a hospital or the certified senior centers, the validation certification is a unique selling point for these facilities in our region. More and more people in Germany are inquiring about the facilities concepts for working with people living with dementia before their relatives move into the home. So it is an advantage for the senior centers to be certified.
Thank you for all of that. I'm looking at the questions and answers, and there are 2 that I think are appropriate, or perfect for right now. One is, are there any best ways for keeping the culture of using validation alive? And how do you motivate staff to use the approach consistently?
To the first question, I think to develop a validation concept for the daily life and to have the goal to certify a unit or a home is the way to hold validation alive. If we do not have these audits, this control, internal and external, it could also stay alive, but it is better to have this self-control and to have this ongoing external validation quality certification and the feedback by the auditor. This is you in our institution. We learn with your feedback, and this holds validation alive in our 10 homes and 1 hospital.
Yeah.
This is really great, a really great thing.
I do want to tell our audience, it is stunning to walk into an acute care hospital. And Hedwig, you didn't tell this bit, so I'm going to. She developed this idea of the green ladies. These are volunteers. And when somebody, say an older woman, breaks her hip, she's brought in by an ambulance. If they can identify that she is disoriented, They call upstairs for the green lady. The green lady accompanies this old woman on her way through the intake, all the way up to the OR. And then that after the operation and she's ready to be moved to a regular room, there is a special unit for people, older adults living with cognitive decline. The internist on that unit is a certified validation practitioner. Everything is thought of from the perspective of the patient. This blew me away. I don't think it's anywhere in the world. I needed to share that because it's fantastic and unique. Somebody brings up the point how you spend a lot of time and money training your personnel, and then they get up and leave. How do you keep trained personnel within your organization?
How do we keep trained personnel in our organization? I think this depends on the facility manager, the upper and the middle management. If they are good trained in validation, they keep their personnel. We have yes, in Germany there is ein Sprichwort. Der Fisch stinkt vom Kopf zuerst. Der Fisch stinkt vom Kopf zuerst. How?
This is an expression in German, and it's the fish stinks from the head first.
Yes.
I think that's a good answer to the question.
Yes.
And I see that we are perfectly on time. Hedwig, thank you, not just for doing this interview in English, which you did great. Thank you so much. But also in front of these 723 people, I want to congratulate you on 20 years of truly magnificent work.
Thank you.
And what Naomi said, you give Naomi hope and energy, and it enables her to find integrity. And that's really true.
I'm really grateful for this. And it's an honor for me to work for validation. And it's an honor for me that Naomi Feil gives us this communication method. I'm grateful for this. This helps that our world is a little bit better.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you.